So let's start off by making something move. We're going to start off with our player character, and we'll set up the basic controls for our character and just get something on screen going. So we'll drag our prefab player onto our hierarchy, so he's inside of our scene, so we can work with him and edit with him. And we're going to go ahead and go to our script for our player. So I'm just going to double click on the script right here. And as it loads up, we can edit this script. Depending on how you actually like to work with your scripts, you may find that some people like to use a style of leaving our curly bracket at the top or taking to the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and take mine to the bottom. Let's start off with a couple of comments at the top. We're going to call this one our player script. And then we can go ahead and call this one some inspector variables. And we could call some private variables. And this way we're defining what we're actually going to be putting in here. So we've got a player script. We're going to have some inspector variables we'll place in here. We'll have some private variables that we'll place in here. And we've got our initial function update, which is just our game loop that we're going to work within. So what is it that we want to do? What we want to do is be able to control this player character with a keyboard, which means we're going to have to be dealing with some input, and then we actually want to be able to have some interaction inside of our environment. So we'll tackle one thing first and then move on to the others. The first thing we want to do is just how do we get input? How do we capture something from the keyboard or from the mouse and then have an action based on it? So let's start off by doing a little bit of pseudocode. Just say what is it we want to do inside of this update. We want to be able to move player based on input, right? So there's our move player based on input. Now when we're dealing with a scripting language for the first time or with an API, generally what we want to do is make sure that we can at least verbalize what we want to do, and then we can check on our API and find out if we can use some of these words inside of our search for our API to give us some clues. So we're wanting to move something, we want to work with input, so let's try in our search for input. And when we search, fortunate for us, we actually have an input, so let's just click on our input here. And in the input, we get a lot of information in here. It talks basically about the input manager that we can get to and change out some variables. We have some touch input that we could use if we're doing a touch device. And then we get all the way down here to the bottom where we find some class variables. So we've got some mouse positions, we've got some touch events, we've got some class functions below that where we can get axis information, button information, and key information. So all of a sudden we've got some words that sound like what we may want. So let's go ahead and take a look at the definition. We've got a get key. If we look at this, it says returns true while the user holds down the key identified by the name. Think auto fire. So they're giving you some clues as to what it might do. You've got some get key down. So this is saying that during the frame the user starts pressing the down key, it's identified by a name. So perhaps what we're looking for is the get key down. Let's go ahead and left click on that one. It's going to take us to more of its definition. We have the input.getKeyDown. We get our function. What is this function? How is it set up? It's looking for a name, and it's basically returning a value of true or false, whether it's pushed down. So we continue on down. The nice thing with the API is it's well documented. It's got plenty of examples to show you exactly what you may want to do. Now here we say if input.getKeyDown space, then we're going to print out some information to our console. Now this is just dealing with if I'm going to push a key, I'm going to do something. Now there's also some built-in functionality called the axis, so we can actually work from the axis instead of just the get key down. So let's go back to our input and let's look at this first part. To read an axis, use the input get axis with one of the following default axis, horizontal or vertical. Now where are these defined? These horizontal and vertical are defined inside of our edit, in our project settings, inside of our input. So if we go to our input, we look in our inspector, we have axis, we have our horizontal, and we have our vertical. So this is where we're actually defining inside of our input manager those variables that we see inside of the API. So here we've defined it with a name. This is a name we would use inside of a script to call up. This is what it's actually going to be doing based on calling it up. So let's say we've got horizontal and vertical there. Let's take a peek back at our API. So we're going to be calling up an axis information. So let's click on our input get axis. Now when we do this, fortunate for us, we actually have some basic controls already laid out for us. They have a very simple driving type game set up where we're actually able to control a vehicle and move it left, right, and rotate it around. Now what we want to do is try to find, when you're beginning learning scripting, you're always looking for what's out there so I can kind of pull parts and pieces, and you don't necessarily want to Frankenstein things together, but you do want to learn from those parts and pieces that you pull together so you understand what is it doing, why do things happen the way they do. So for us, let's go ahead and pull up our script file. Let's say we were just to take this information, paste it in, and then actually just see what happens with it. So we're going to go into here, and you'll notice that there's a function update right here. And we have a function update. We can only have one function update inside of our scene. So if we're going to replace it, we can just replace with that one. And we're just going to copy and paste. My suggestion when you're first learning code is definitely don't copy and paste, but actually type it out. Get comfortable with the words, comfortable with the syntax, and typing it out is going to be the only way you're really going to achieve that. So we've got the information in here. We've got some variables that are going to appear inside of the inspector. We've got just set as a var instead of a private variable. And then we look inside of the update. We're basically doing what? We have a variable translation that we're making a float, and it's the vertical. We're making one that's the horizontal. And then we've got some information set up so that we can control the speed of our player, and then we're passing that information into our transform for our translation and our rotation. So let's save this one out. Let's go back to Unity, and inside of Unity we're just simply going to hit play, and we're going to use the keyboard, and we can see that we've already got control. Left and right rotate us, up and down move us forward and backward. So just like that, copying some basic script that's inside of Unity, we can go ahead and get some controls on our object. But now what we want to do is we want to go back to it. We want to try to figure out what is it exactly that we're doing and see if we can't lay it out in a way that makes a little more sense for us.